Good morning, everyone. Let's take a closer look at today's markets. We will cover the US dollar index, WTI crude oil, gold, and the Australian dollar. So, starting with the US dollar index, the index eased back to around 98.2 on Tuesday after giving up some of its earlier gains. The move followed heightened political drama in Washington, where President Trump threatened follow on tariffs on US tech companies in response to Europe's digital service tax. And at the same time, questions about the Fed's independence resurfaced after Trump's dismissed Fed Governor Lisa Cook, accusing her of misconduct. And markets quickly interpret the shakeup as another sign of pressure on Jerome Powell's leadership, reinforcing expectations for a rate cut as soon as September. And futures market are pricing in more than an 83% chance of a quarter point cut. And from a technical view, the index is consolidating between 98 support and 98.75 resistance. The momentum indicators are stuck in neutral, with the RSI holding just below 50. If the index falls under 98, it could revisit last week's low near 97.7, and a deeper test of a July low around 97.2 can't be ruled out. And on the upside, 98.45 and then 98.75 are the key hurdles before any sustained rebound. Turning to WTI crude oil, the oil prices slipped 2.2% to about $63 a barrel, retreating from a 3 week high touch on Monday. The pullback reflected renewed worries about global demand and rising supply. Ukrainian strikes on Russian energy facilities initially lifted prices, but the optimism faded as sanctions headlines and trade tensions complicated the outlook. The US has also threatened new tariffs on Indian exports in response to its continued purchases of Russian crude, adding further uncertainty to flows. And technically, WTI is showing signs of fatigue. Prices are hovering near $63, with the 9-day moving average around this level acting as short term support. A break lower could bring the August low at third at 61.45 into view, with the round number at 61 next on watch. Resistance, meanwhile, comes in at Monday's high near 64.95, followed by 65.75, which is the mid range retracement level from earlier in the summer. Unless oil can reclaim and hold about 65, the overall tone remains neutral to bearish. Moving to spot gold, gold continues to consolidate just below the 3,400 mark, trading around 33.90 an ounce. The metal has found support from expectation of Fed easing, but short-term moves are increasingly tied to headlines around inflation data and US politics. Powell's remarks last week helped spark a rally, and traders are now waiting for the PCE inflation release later this week for confirmation. And from a chart perspective, gold has broken out of a wedge pattern and is holding above its 200-hour moving average near 3350. The RSI is close to 70, but not yet in overbought territory, leaving room for another push higher. Immediate resistance sits at 3400, followed by the late July high near 3439. A sustained breakout could open the door to a retest of the all-time high around 3500. And on the downside, the 3345 to 3350 zone is first support, with stronger back at 3323 and then the psychological 3300 level. And finally, the Australian dollar. The Aussie dollar steadied near 0.6490 after a volatile week. The minutes from the RBA confirmed that further rate cuts remain on the table, though the pace will depend on incoming data. The RBA lowered its cash rate to 3.6% at its August meeting, and markets now expect another cut by November. Despite the policy shift, the improved consumer confidence in Australia has provided a small cushion on the currency. And on the charts, Australian dollar has rebounded from last week's low near 0.6415, and the pair is testing the central Bollinger line around 0.6490, with 0.6505 as immediate resistance. A break above that could bring 0.6550 into play, while support rests at 0.6460 and then 0.64 if the sentiment weakens again. So, to wrap up, the US dollar remains caught between political pressure and Fed expectations. Crude oil is under strain from rising supply and uncertain demand. Gold is steady but poised for another breakout attempt, and Australian dollar is holding its ground ahead of the key domestic data. With US inflation data looming, the second half of the week could set the tone for broader market moves. So that's all for today. Thank you for watching.